My name is Brad, and I work for a company that sets up computers in banks. One day, my boss sent me to a small town where a new branch of the bank was opening. They needed to set up the computer system there. The business trip was for a whole week. All my colleagues refused, so the boss sent me. When I arrived, it immediately became clear to me why everyone had refused. The town was very old and dirty. The only entertainment options were bars, which visitors were better off not entering. There were rude people everywhere. There was only one place in town that I visited, a roadside cafe. The coffee and food there were disgusting, but there were no other options. I stood out among the locals, constantly catching curious glances from the townsfolk. I often heard phrases like, "What's he doing here?" behind my back. The only person I met was a 23-year-old waitress named Tiffany, a beautiful girl with a radiant smile. We started talking, and one day she asked me to give her a ride home. She told me she dreamed of leaving this town. Here, she could never find a partner because all the guys were only interested in alcohol and American football. She didn't want to be a farmer's wife. She had relationships with truck drivers who promised to marry her, but then she found out they had families. My relationship with Tiffany started developing very quickly, and 3 days later, we woke up in the same bed. I was happy, but it saddened me that I had to leave in 2 days. When I told Tiffany about it, she burst into tears and said, "How will I live without you?" That's when I said, "Come with me," and she immediately calmed down and agreed. We moved into my small house that I inherited from my parents. Tiffany went to study hairdressing, and I continued to work. The first 6 months passed like a fairy tale. We got married. The wedding was very modest, with a few friends and Tiffany's mother who came to the ceremony. Then Tiffany asked her mother to live with us because she didn't want her to return to that cursed town. I didn't mind. We moved into my small house, which I inherited from my parents. Tiffany went to study hairdressing, and I continued to work. The first 6 months passed like a fairy tale. We got married. The wedding was very modest, with a few friends and Tiffany's mother who came to the ceremony. Then Tiffany asked her mother to live with us because she didn't want her to return to that cursed town. I didn't mind. One day, the conversation turned to children, and Tiffany said, "Let's wait." She explained that she needed money for a car right now, and it would be wonderful to buy a bigger house. She said her mother would soon find a job and help us. Tiffany's mother was a charming blonde with a very beautiful figure. She was only 43 years old. She dressed in revealing outfits, and sometimes I was even afraid to look at her. She often flirted with me, knowing that I was embarrassed, which only provoked her more. One day, I forgot the lunch Tiffany had prepared for me, and she brought it to me at work in her new car, which we bought her. My colleagues were surprised to see Tiffany. They commented on how beautiful my wife was. At first, they didn't even believe she was my wife. My boss said, "Take care of her, she's too beautiful for you." Tiffany came to my work a few more times. More time passed, and I was sent on another business trip. Tiffany saw me off, crying she was very afraid that I would find a new wife. Proudly, I promised to remain faithful to her. Every day, I called her and told her how things were going. We talked for a long time and expressed our love for each other. Tiffany calmed down and said she believed me. My business trips became regular. My boss said, "Brad, our clients speak highly of you, so sending you out puts my mind at ease." I was pleased, especially since these trips paid significantly more, and I really needed the money. One day, I returned and saw expensive watches on the kitchen table. When I asked Tiffany where they came from, she calmly replied that her mother, Dorothy, had a suitor. He had visited her yesterday and stayed overnight. Apparently, after a passionate night, he forgot them, Tiffany said with a smirk. A few days later, I overheard a phone conversation between my boss and his wife. He said he had lost his watches and didn't know where they were, asking her to look for them. At the time, I didn't think much of this conversation. But a month later, when I returned home, I saw my boss's car leaving my house. I couldn't be mistaken. His car bore the emblem of our company. When I arrived home, I saw Tiffany in her robe, and the bed in the bedroom was not made. My wife said she had been busy and forgot to make it. Her voice sounded unsure. It was clear that my questions caught her off guard. That's when I decided to install a hidden camera in the house. For a week, I secretly watched, but I didn't see anything suspicious. Tiffany was busy with her tasks and led her usual lifestyle. But soon, I was sent on another business trip. As soon as I arrived, I turned on the camera. And to my surprise, I saw my boss. The first thought that came to my mind was that he had come to see my mother-in-law. But soon I realized he had come to see Tiffany. They were talking in the kitchen, and Tiffany said, "Justin, I think Brad is starting to suspect something." Justin, my boss, calmly replied, "Tiffany, your husband is so stupid that he's incapable of anything. I keep him around only because of you. If it weren't for you, I would have fired him long ago." Tiffany laughed and said she completely agreed. Those words hurt me deeply, and I went home. On the way, I imagined bursting into the house and confronting Justin like a lion attacking a turtle. When I arrived home, fear gripped me. I couldn't move. Justin was bigger than me and could easily overpower me. I waited until my boss left, then returned home. Tiffany was calm. She asked why I returned early. I replied that I forgot my driver's license and tools for work. Then she offered me something to eat. All this time, I watched her. She remained calm and confident. That's when I realized what a talented actress she was. I decided I would seek revenge on her, like a real man. The next day, I went to my boss's house. I waited until he left, then knocked on his door. His wife answered. I introduced myself and said I had some very interesting information. She invited me in. When we were in the kitchen, she offered me coffee, and I began my story. After listening attentively, Penelope said, "Why are you telling me all this? What are you suggesting?" I said, "Let's get back at them the same way they do it." Penelope almost fell over laughing, and I blushed. When she calmed down, she said, "I know my husband cheats on me with various women of low moral character. But he always comes back to me. I will definitely get back at him, but not with someone as pathetic as you. Now get out of my house." As a parting shot, she said, "I understand why your wife cheats on you, and I don't blame her." Coming home, I told Tiffany that I know the whole truth. She calmly told me that she wanted to tell me everything herself. "Brad, I'm tired of living with such a loser like you. You're not capable of anything. I'm leaving you." Justin offered me a job at his office and promised a good salary. Now I'll be able to support myself. But you, probably, will have to look for a new job. Just as Tiffany said, everything happened exactly like that. She went to work for Justin, and I was simply fired. This turn of events was a shock to me. For a whole week, I was in shock and couldn't get out of bed or say a word. All day long, I just remained silent. Fortunately, my former mother-in-law, Dorothy, came to my rescue. She began to take care of me. She said that life goes on, and you can't stop. She invited me for a walk in the park. Before long, I realized my feelings and understood that I liked my mother-in-law. Previously, I restrained myself because I was in a relationship with Tiffany, but now I'm free, and she's no longer my mother-in-law. We fell in love, and soon after divorcing Tiffany, we got married. I'm happy that everything turned out this way. I don't know where Tiffany is now. Justin kicked her out after a month. It wasn't his decision, but his wife's condition. Tiffany moved to another state and occasionally calls her mother, who is now my wife.